Experience on the fire ground is vital, but the one thing that I feel that suffers the most is the non-emergency aspects of being an officer, the leadership skills, the mentorship skills, and administrative duties, just overall attitude. Those are the things that we strive to cover a lot in our own Officer Candidate Academy.
From Los Angeles, this is Code 3, the Firefighters Podcast, hosted by award-winning journalist Scott Orr. Now, here's Scott.
That's right, and I will not let Parkinson stop me. Thank you for joining me today for another edition of Code 3. This is the show that gives you all the information on a firefighting topic that you need in about 20 minutes. Let's get started. There's a lot of advice floating around that explains what a firefighter needs to do to get promoted to an officer position. And there's also quite a bit about leadership and what to do once you are promoted. On this edition of the show, we're going to look at a couple of different sides of the promotion equation. First, how to prepare yourself for a promotion, and then what impact on the department promotions can have. Both are important and both are often overlooked. My guest to discuss these topics is Paul Watlington. He's the Battalion Chief of Training for the Burlington, North Carolina Fire Department. Paul is also a member of the Yanceyville Volunteer Fire Department. He has 22 years of experience in the fire service and has many certifications from the National Fire Academy and the North Carolina Office of the State Fire Marshal. And Paul Watlington joins me now. Welcome back to Code 3.
Hey, Scott, thanks for having me once again, man. Enjoyed the conversation we had on our last show. Looking forward to talking to you again today.
Good deal. It's good to have you back. So there are two kinds of preparations for new officers in a department. What the candidate does and how the department reacts to new leadership. Let's look at the candidate first. Do candidates for officer positions really spend enough time preparing for the job?
I think the preparation is there, but I guess the biggest question is it effective? The preparation and development goes, beyond controlled environments and extends well beyond the point of you being promoted to officer. We can hold mock interview panels, perform live fire scenarios, use simulators, and sit in leadership classes. But the mentorships and write-up programs and development courses really prove to work great as well, when we provide those. It all needs to start early, though. We can't wait until the projected officer opening is coming up to start preparing to be an officer. Building that culture of development in your department is key, and that starts with just being an advocate for leaders in your department, being an advocate for empowerment and making sure that we value the value of our employees is evident. We don't need members to feel intimidated or pressured to move up. They need to see the value and prestige and honor of being an officer. They need to embrace that challenge of being in that role and need to see the benefit of being an officer. And all of that just takes time.
As I pointed out, a lot of candidates for officer have read books on leadership and what they should do once they get the job. But what should they be doing before the opening is announced so they'll be ready when it is announced?
One of the biggest things that I see is many aspiring officers, because they have had that time in other ranks, are tactically sound. They've been around, they've seen their officers operate. And those decision-making skills improve over time by watching their officers and simply just being part of the tactics. Maybe in other roles, but they're still involved and they still see those decisions made. Experience on the fire ground is vital, but the one thing that I feel that suffers the most is the non-emergency aspects of being an officer, the leadership skills, the mentorship skills, and administrative duties like communications, reporting, handling personnel issues, just overall attitude. Those are the things that we strive to cover a lot in our own Officer Candidate Academy that we run here in Burlington. And we hold that once a year for aspiring officers as some of that supplementation, some of that preparation that we give our officers before they get thrown in that hot seat so they can kind of get a feel of what's expected. And there's some that will move through the ranks with with a little lack of sound tactical leadership or decision making. But there's sometimes the quickest aspects of the job to catch up on pretty quick.
Now, you mentioned an officer academy. Recruits in most departments get those. They might be one day, they might be a week. What should a good officer academy teach these people ahead of time?
I think it needs to be a healthy dose of some tactics and some, of the administrative decision making too. I kind of break those two up into tactical decision making and administrative decision making. Of course, there's a lot more to it than that, but the administrative side of the job is, and I guess one of the biggest, like I said in my earlier statement, one of the biggest things that suffers the most. But I think an officer candidate academy, for example, ours is kind of hybrid. We do run online at your pace version. However, we also run a face-to-face version of it too. And it's a good, healthy dose of administrative and the tactical aspects of the job. Mentorship training, leadership training, management training, tactical training, just a handful of the tactics that we use on scene. And those as an officer role, making decisions using those tactics versus necessarily being the implementer of them.
It sounds like what you're saying is that the people who've been working as firefighters already have a pretty good idea of how to say a size up over the radio. But they probably don't have as much experience with the administrative role that they'll be playing. Is that fair?
Yes, that's accurate. And from what I'm seeing,
what can we do to make sure that they understand that administrative half of the job? Is it half or is it more or less?
I guess it's just a healthy mixture. I mean, it depends on what fire districts you're working in. The makeup of your districts. One department may not run a lot of medical calls. One may run 70 to 80% medical calls. One department may work in a district that is predominantly fires, where it's not as many vehicle accidents. I don't know what call volumes are. It's everything has to be customized to your department, and your resources, what your needs are based off of a needs assessment, capabilities assessment. They're important. Find out through drills and performance testing, where are your officers lacking? Where are your members that are aspiring officers? What do they need to be more successful? And then customize your officer candidate academy based on your needs as a department.
When you run these academies, what sort of missing pieces do you typically notice? What do they not know that they should?
A lot of it's policy, just because policy is normally not pulled out in red unless something has happened. A lot of times, some of the most positive feedback that we've gotten from our academies is, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't realize that was already in place. For an example, I tell the members at our department, when we were kind of selling this aspect of the Officer Candidate Academy, if you're an officer and you're sitting at the kitchen table with your crew and one of the crew members asks you to explain the workers' comp, program or plan at your department or for your municipality or county, you should be able to answer those questions. When a firefighter comes to you and says, hey, can you explain the EAP program? How do I implement this EAP program? How do I, start this? You should be able to answer those questions. You are the one that your firefighters are looking up to pretty much be the fix to the problems. And, many of them you won't be able to fix, but there's those little things are what I see a lot of that is the missing pieces of the puzzle. The company officer's role in mentoring and setting up a system or setting up a plan for the future of their firefighter or engineer, whoever's there, based on what their goals are, being part of their success. Some of those things are some of the missing pieces that I think many aspiring officers don't really think about as much when everything seems to be driven more tactical.
All right, let's look at the receiving end of the promotion, which is the department. The newer crop of officers just getting into position grew up in a time when structure fires aren't as common as they once were. So what's the impact of having so many new officers with less experience fighting real-world fires?
I don't think it's a negative impact, but it is an impact. I mean, it's a challenge for leadership to a department or in a department to recognize this and do something to improve it. I mean, going back to what I mentioned about the capabilities assessment, We have to be more of an advocate for training and development, outside education, mentorships. If your department allows or utilizes write-up programs, that's awesome. In an earlier podcast that I actually listened to with you and Kelly Lemons, he mentioned that. And that's a great tool if you can make that happen, the write-up program. Explore what options you have to supplement that lack of firefighting experience. I mean, the fire service is collectively young, so you're naturally going to have young officers. Hiring ages are as low as 18 years old now. With 8 to 10 years of experience on the job, now we have lieutenants and captains that are in their 20s, and that's okay. I'm personally not interested in your time in rank. I'm interested in your preparation levels and your capabilities and what you've done in that period of time.
Well, that's kind of the problem, isn't it? I mean, if you're talking about a boomer or a Gen X person who's been an officer for a while, when he or she got into the job, it was probably after seeing a lot more examples of real-world fires. What quality difference does that make in their leadership? Are they still learning while they're leading?
I think so. It reminds me of, we had a veteran captain come into the station one day to visit, and I actually sat down with that individual and asked him, what made your leaders, the leaders that you considered leaders, what made them leaders? And one of the biggest takebacks for that for me was he mentioned we just naturally trusted one another. We watched every move that our officers and leaders made, and we bought into it. They just had this natural way of getting us to buy into everything that they wanted to do, and it just all made sense. And they were very good communicators, and they explained everything when we asked questions. And, they were quick to tell you when you didn't need to know something, but they also included you on the things that you did. And it was just a different approach to it. We're still having fires. I mean, I don't want a lot of people to think that, the new firefighters in today's society are not seeing the fires that the older firefighters did. It's just that the everyday daily routines have changed. I mean, we have so many other, tasks to complete during a daily activity. Back years ago when many fire departments didn't run medical calls where they are now. I mean, the call volumes have tremendously increased. You're having a lack of availability or lack of time to train when you're on calls, 20, 30 responses a day, so that's played a big part in it too. But, there's always room for improvement, always room for growth. And even with the Gen X's that are here, this multi-generational era right now is an example of room to improve for those that are already in leadership roles. There's a lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings on both parts, but showing that the new generation coming in, the Gen X's or the older style leaderships, may have to be tweaked just a little to be able to match the needs of the new generation coming in.
Well, since you touched on it, let's go there next. How different is the leadership style of Gen Xers or millennials from the retiring generation? We've heard a lot of things about how millennials work. How do they lead? Again,
we're definitely in a multi-generational era. And I think, like I mentioned earlier about those misunderstandings or misconceptions on both sides, a lot of the different generations like to pin the problem on another generation when that's not necessarily the case. The problem, I think, is the adaptation of the multi-generational services. There are leaders in all generations. We just have to understand how to recognize that and build on it. In many cases, like the Gen X leadership is in place leading Generation Y, Generation Zs. And, that has the opportunity to go south if it's not understood. There's a learning adjustment opportunity from the top to the bottom and back up. Leaders in organizations, should embrace that new generation rather than consider them a hurdle. Understanding what drives them and what they bring to the table is vital. The Gen Zs, they want to be engaged in their own success. They want you to be engaged in it. They want to know why. They want to communicate. Social media and technology is their wheelhouse. We should embrace that and find the strengths in it and build on it. They want to be empowered. Embrace that as well. Leadership and departments have their own changes to make to adapt to some of these multi-generational situations.
So when you look back at the current generation of leaders and how they came in and changed the face of the fire service. What do you think the change will look like from Gen Z or millennials? How will they make the fire service look different than it does now if you could use your crystal ball?
Crystal ball. I think, there will obviously be positive changes and things will transition. The Gen X's with particular leadership styles, not that they're bad, they will be retiring out and you will have a new generation of firefighters who, look at all of the aspects of the job a little bit different, from public education. Tactics are tactics. I mean, that's really not much room to change there as far as the fact that we're responding to fires. But the technological side of things and leadership will change, but the technological side of things is what's going to probably be the biggest impact or have the biggest change. I see many manufacturers already going ahead and preparing manufacturers of all kinds of fire service equipment from apparatus all the way down to tools, already preparing for this new generation to take over of the fire service, and everything is technologically driven. It's nothing as simple as it used to be anymore. But and that's a learning curve for all of us older folks that are in the fire service that are still hanging around. We're having to learn this information just as well. So I think that there will be positive changes moving forward. The Gen X, the Gen Ys, or the new generation of firefighters, they're going to make it their own, and it will continue to thrive and continue to succeed.
Yeah, when I was at Firehouse World even a couple of years ago, there was an apparatus manufacturer who was very proud of their pump panel because it could be operated from an iPad. And they said, today's firefighters are going to love this. And I thought, yeah, they might, they probably will, but to me that was kind of a strange thing to be using to promote your apparatus. Not that technology was better, which it might be, but that the firefighters were going to like it more.
The technological side of things is everything looks attractive, right? Everything's new. Anytime you can put a computer screen on something or anytime you can put buttons on something, it just makes it more attractive in the ease of use. That's what, a lot of the new generation wants is immediate satisfaction of knowing that something works and that where it does not. There's not really much time for troubleshooting in many of them's mind, to work through. I mean, all of that, like I said, all of those technological advances seem to be setting up for the new generation of the firefighters. You go to a lot of old firefighters, especially on the pump panel, and hey, here's a pressure governor, or hey, here's a manual throttle truck. Which one do you want? Oh, I want the manual throttle truck because I know I have all of it.
Because I know how it works.
Yeah, I know how it works, and I got full control over the throttle on the truck, and it's all in my hands. I don't want to rely on technology. Whereas the new generation does want to rely on technology. They like to pick things out and be able to go through it and get the most use out of it. Whereas you're not going to see that much of that with older generation.
Okay, I don't want to sound too negative here, but there's definitely a group of older firefighters who would suggest that millennials are part of the everybody gets a trophy generation, or the participation trophies. Is that going to affect how they're going to lead? How will it affect how they're going to lead?
I don't think it's necessarily a participation trophy issue or everybody wants to. I think it's, the new generation wants to be recognized for their achievements, and that's okay. I think that's important and it's appropriate. They feed off of the pat on the back. They need to know that they're doing a good job because they may not understand or may not be doing things like the older generation did or expected them is expecting them to do at the time. But that's okay. We just some of us older ones we're not used to that. We're used to pack the hose on the truck, get back to the fire station, clean it up. There's not a whole lot of pats on the back. There's not a whole lot of critiques where everybody is told how good of a job they did. And, but this newer generation, they need that. They want that. And that's okay. So I don't think it's necessarily a participation trophy problem or issue. I think it's just recognizing good things, on the spot recognition, maybe in the form of, ceremonies, stuff like that. That's not a bad thing.
It sounds like it's just an adjustment, not a major change in how things, major shift in how things are done.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's an adjustment. It's an adjustment from it, from each generation to another. And just like I mentioned earlier, this multi-generational fire service is just everyone has room to grow and learn from one another, and to be able to coexist. That's the key.
All right. Well, we'll see how it turns out. It sounds like we have reason to be optimistic. Paul Watlington, thanks for talking with me today.
Yes, sir, Scott. I appreciate you having me again. Look forward to talking to you soon.
And there's more information on the topic of preparing for promotion on our website at code3podcast.com/ready. Take a look. If you're still listening, congratulations. You're officially a hardcore fan of Code 3. Now, may I make a suggestion? If you're up for it, you can become a patron of the show and offer your financial support. You can make a monthly donation to Code 3, and if it's $10 a month or more, you'll get access instantly to the Code 3 Bull Sessions. Those are extras from some interviews, material that didn't make the cut in the show. But it's interesting all the same, and you'll enjoy it. Just go to code3podcast.com/support, and you'll find the information you need to become a Code 3 patron. Thanks for your support, and thanks for listening. All right, that's it. That's all for this edition of Code 3. Thank you for being here. I'll be back next time with more, and I hope you'll join me. I'm Scott Orr, and until then, stay safe.
To contact us, get more information on today's show, or to subscribe to the podcast, go to code3podcast.com.